Belgioioso Cheese is a family-owned and operated company specializing in artisan Italian cheesemaking. Using only natural ingredients and fresh local Wisconsin milk, master cheesemakers handcraft the full line of exceptional cheeses, guided by a commitment to quality and a respect for tradition. Ask your distributor about Belgioioso's award-winning fresh mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, mascarpone, American Grana, and Parmesan. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I am Sam Oches, editor-in-chief here at NRN, joined once again by my esteemed colleague, executive editor Alicia Kelso. Alicia, welcome.
Hello.
Alicia, you eat anything good this week?
That caught me off guard.
The intake was like, something big was coming.
Oh, we go out to dinner with our best friends probably once every other month. And we went to dinner a couple days ago at a local joint called Ceviche. It's like Latin infused with Southern, and it's delicious. The chef there is a Beard semifinalist. And whenever we go there. You want to try something new? Let's go there. And I always think about it for days and days and days afterwards. So it's called Ceviche, and it's in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's pretty well known.
That's great. Not many miles separate us, Alicia, but it might as well be an entire chunk of the country for the sake of once you cross that Ohio River, you get those great Southern restaurants. And I do miss living in the South, having lived for 13 years in Durham, North Carolina, and the Southern restaurants. And there's all kinds of Southern, hybrid, whatever, like you're explaining in Ceviche. And it's just so good. Now, here in the Midwest, we've got our own great restaurants. But it feels like in Columbus, nobody really wants to tackle Southern food because we're not in the South. But there's not so much distance that separates us. Come on, people. This is my invitation to all of you Southern chefs. Come open a restaurant in Columbus. I'll help you out. We'll figure it out because we could use some good Southern food in this city.
You could also come visit me and I'll just take you out.
Yeah, I'm just going to drive down to Louisville. It's not that far.
Nope.
Okay. Well, we have had some good times in Louisville.
Yeah.
It's a good city. I support you in Louisville. What am I supposed to say?
And I support you in Columbus. As you know, I used to live there and I loved it, except for that one area of campus.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, you. It's okay. Well, I tried one of the newer Cameron Mitchell restaurants here in Columbus this week, Valentina's in Bridge Park in Dublin. If you're familiar, good stuff. I mean, as always, very consistent. And that whole area, Bridge Park probably wasn't around when you were here in Columbus.
It wasn't.
But they're building it up, and now it's like there's downtown Dublin has sort of doubled itself on the other side of the river, and it's very charming. So if you find yourself in Columbus, go find yourself in Bridge Park. Anyway, most of you do not live in this area, so it does not matter. We're going to get into the restaurant headlines. Alicia, we have good and bad to share on the show today, and we're getting into earnings season. So we're getting into the thick of finding out how was 2024 for companies and the industry. We're getting into how does Q1 look, and it is distinctly mixed results. We're going to get into Dutch Bros. We're going to get into McDonald's. We'll touch on a few others, and then we'll talk about technology at the end of all this. But it's going to be a roller coaster, folks, and we're going to start with the good. Last week, I started with the bad, and I apologize for that because you want to start with the good. Let's start in the high. Dutch Bros. Dutch Bros reported 6.9% increase in same-store sales in Q4. 35% revenue growth. They just passed 1,000 stores. They opened 151 new stores in 2024. They're rolling with their mobile ordering. That's doing very well for them. And currently, less than 2% of their sales are accounted by food, but they are planning to increase that and make food a bigger part of what they're doing. Lots to like here in Dutch Bros. Yeah, Alicia?
Yeah, lots to like. I want to note that 6.9% same-store sales was on top of 10% last year. So really challenging comps, and they didn't really miss a beat. I want to say that I was surprised. It did exceed expectations, Wall Street expectations, but Q4 was the first full quarter for this mobile ordering capability with Dutch Bros. And I kind of expected a huge tailwind from that. You're talking about a concept, that is a habitual concept. Drive-through convenience is the name of the game. If you turn on mobile ordering system-wide, it's gonna produce a huge tailwind, and that's exactly what we saw here. I also am really intrigued with the loyalty business that Dutch Bros has generated. Their loyalty members accounted for 71% of transactions during the quarter. So we have these ongoing conversations about how loyalty is increasingly becoming table stakes for various reasons. And Dutch Bros is writing a playbook right in front of our eyes. And it's really, really cool to see. And those two things sort of go hand in hand. The ease and convenience of this model sort of, call for these two things to be, well-oiled machines. And they're both fairly new. And I think that the upside here is really going to be something to behold. I don't think that there's going to be any slowing down. I don't want to be dismissive of the unit economics here, too. Their margins are near 29%. Their average unit volumes were up 2%. They're now at $2 million. And so when we talk about the growth that this company has, experienced especially in the past year and a half, there's no slowing down here either. And in fact, there's an analyst, Sharon Zakfia from William Blair, who believes the opportunity for the white space for Dutch Bros is probably going to exceed their initial 2021 goal of 4,000 and maybe even hit 6,000. And if you have those unit economics and you have the loyalty that we're seeing, I don't know why anybody would really, really question that. I think that there's a huge, like I said, upside here for Dutch Bros.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, perhaps only two things that could slow them down are the food part of it. If they don't ramp up their food, as they said, food is one of those things that for those who want food, they might take their business elsewhere because they can't get it at Dutch Bros. So that by incorporating more food, hopefully it will take care of that hurdle. But the other hurdle could simply be competition, because they're not the only ones who have identified that white space. Of course, you have, Seven Brew and some others that are also racing to open as many of them as they can. But, I don't think that's so crazy to say 6,000 restaurants when you consider the fact that Dutch Bros is primarily in the West. They've just started to open in the East in Florida, starting to expand that footprint. But I mean, here we are in the Midwest, and there's no Dutch Bros here yet. And it's really going to shake things up, I think, when they get here. But Seven Brew, if they can really kind of own the markets before Dutch Bros shows up, that will be a good thing for them. Let's not discount here. We've got Bigby in Ohio and Michigan and Midwest. Of course, you've got Scooters as well. So the competition might be the only thing that could really risk slowing Dutch Bros down. But I mean, I'm with you. I wouldn't bet against them. That loyalty factor is so fascinating because of the fact that, of course, your coffee and your morning routine especially is that it's a routine. And so I think loyalty is huge to the success of these brands that have to really bake themselves into the lifestyle of their customers. So for 71% of their customers, of their transactions to be loyalty customers, it makes sense, but is still all the more impressive when you consider just how much Dutch Bros has ingrained itself into people's routines, into their lives. And I would be interested to see that same number for Seven Brew, because I would imagine it's probably the same. And they have that SMS loyalty program that they're so high on, and perhaps it could be even higher for Seven Brew.
Matter of fact, I just redeemed my free Seven Brew this morning. I'd swing by there every Friday morning on my way home from swim practice. It is very convenient. We've got 3 locations within a 5 radius of my house of Seven Brew. I'll have some interesting anecdotes this summer because there's a Dutch Bros opening. They're finally debuting in Louisville, and they're going to be open about 2 blocks from the Seven Brew that I go to every Friday. It's real close. So there's 2 Starbucks in that little frame too. There's a standalone Starbucks and a Target Starbucks. So things are about to get real heated in Louisville, Kentucky.
Literally and figuratively. I hope you like coffee, Alicia. I know
do.
You do, but Louisville, it's coming for you. We're going to start pouring the scalding stuff down your throat. Come on this way, folks. Come on. We got plenty of room here in Columbus, and they are. I imagine it's not going to be so long before Dutch Bros is rolling up here in Columbus. and I will eagerly embrace it, much like the Seven Brew that just opened by my house, which you can see from very far away with that distinct blue lighting on the Seven Brew. I assume yours also have that. That is a good way to introduce yourself to a market. A big blue glow, which you can see from very far away at night.
Have you tried it yet?
I have not. I need to. I'm so sorry.
Medium brunette on ice, Sam.
Yeah. Okay. Don't know what to say to that outside of, excuse me? Okay, let's move along. Let's talk about McDonald's. Okay, that's the good news. We got the good news out of the way. Nobody wants that good news. Let's talk about bad news. Bad news, McDonald's. Oof. McDonald's reported that in the fourth quarter, their same-store sales declined by 1.4%. Now, for the year in 2024, their same-store sales were up 0.2%, but that is obviously very modest, if not great, considering the fact that you can consider menu price increases and things. Transactions, I didn't grab that number, but presumably are down. McDonald's still reeling from E. coli, it seems.
Yeah, this was the fourth quarter call, which is squarely in the middle of that E. coli outbreak, which was in October, which directly impacted 900 restaurants, which is a big chunk of restaurants, one of their top selling products in the Quarter Pounder. And you have to think about the reputational damage here. The 900 restaurants that were impacted by this one supplier is just part of the story. People may have pulled back from McDonald's elsewhere just because of, just for being nervous or some other reason. So this is why, these sort of outbreaks are never, ever good. And I thought 1.4 was better than I thought it was going to be, all things considered, with the crisis as the backdrop. There was a decline in average check here. So if let's take the E. coli thing out of the picture. By the way, McDonald's, they said that they will be fully recovered from that crisis by the beginning of Q2. They are pouring a bunch of money into marketing and other initiatives. So brighter days ahead here. But let's take that out of the equation here. We had a decline in average check, slightly positive traffic. So it wasn't all terrible news. That basically indicates its $5 meal deal that was launched in June and extended through the end of the year and has now been since rolled into the bigger value platform. It suggests that meal deal is doing what it was intended to do, and that is win back some traffic, particularly among low-income consumers with whom the chain over-indexes. Now, that comes at a cost. Margins are down. Profits fell. So McDonald's is going to spend an awful lot of time and attention this year trying to find the balance to keep that momentum going with that huge cohort of low-income consumers, and while also, balancing that out with full margin products. The Chicken Big Mac is a really good example here. That's a full margin product. It provided a margin tailwind, but it wasn't enough to offset what, the $5 meal deal sort of eroded a little bit there. McDonald's executives did note that this year they will be focusing more on chicken and beverages. Wendy's said the same thing, by the way. So, I guess we're in a chicken and beverage war now.
Lucky us. Lucky us.
We went through, we talked about this. We went through, burger wars and chicken sandwich wars and value wars and sauce wars, and now we're in chicken and beverages. So,
okay, bonus point to whoever puts those two together, because hey, just saying, the chicken beverage is tapped white space. Okay.
I might be cynical about that, but I was cynical about the Skyline chili ice cream too, and I ended up liking it.
Joke's on you. The chicken smoothie's coming your way. You're gonna like it.
So, I think this year we're going to see a lot of, trying to math with McDonald's. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting, again, with that recovery from E. coli, and the McValue platform squarely in place. The big question now is going to be, how it continues to bolster margins after they eroded because of the value environment.
Yeah. Let's get into this. Let's talk about the low income consumer, because especially when we think about the QSR burger space, that to your point, McDonald's over indexes on the low income consumers. Same with Wendy's and Burger King. And so I think we can take what they're all reporting currently as a sort of a barometer of what's going on for that consumer. And I think to your point, Alicia, there is some softness here. We had this expectation perhaps the 2024 things maybe had bottomed out, inflation perhaps had peaked, value meals aplenty, and we should assume, okay, the low-income consumer is feeling a little bit more optimistic now. They're going to rush back and sales will be all hunky-dory again. And that is not the case. And as you have reported, Alicia, there perhaps are some signs that the low-income consumer is pulling back again. And when you consider the instability of everything going on, let's say, they perhaps have good reason to. And, I've talked about eggs more in my life the past couple of weeks than I ever thought I would, because, well, eggs were this sort of, certainly in the election of 2024, people talked about sort of the price of eggs. Well, the price of eggs continues to go up. And there's some indication that inflation could perhaps go up again. And when we consider some of the actions by the administration, for example, the tariff threat, which, of course, hasn't totally played itself out yet, but the tariffs could drive inflation higher. And so with that concern, we recognize that, hey, maybe all of that's happening, low-income consumer might be feeling pinched again, and the first thing they're going to pull back on is the restaurant spend. Alicia, what is the landscape for that consumer today? Why should restaurants be worried?
It's a good question. It's something I tried to figure out this week and reported on with a couple sources, and it's just wonky. The overall restaurant market is muted, as McDonald's executives said. And it's not just McDonald's that over-indexes with low-income consumers. It's most of the industry. Take fine dining out of the equation. Low-income consumers over-index across the board toward restaurants. They always have. QSR obviously is proportionately higher. And McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczinski said that the low-income consumer in the U.S. in Q4 was still down double digits. That actually surprised me because what we heard late in Q3 calls and then with preliminary Q4 results that were released coinciding with ICR at the beginning of January is that the consumer was recovering. Traffic and sales and driven by a more confident consumer, all of that was recovering in sequentially in November and December. And then January came along and it was like, the deep end fell off, kind of like in Q2 in 2024, when all of a sudden traffic fell off a cliff because customers all of a sudden decided, I don't want to pay for these high menu prices anymore. It seems like that happened in Q1. Now, Q1 obviously is marred significantly by weather that impacted much of the country and, of course, the wildfires in California. But there's more here. The low-income consumer has pulled back. To your point, Sam, the CPI index, which we also reported on, this week, was high. Inflation ticked higher largely than expected in January. And the egg prices alone were up 15.2%. And so, what the most telling part of the CPI, the inflation index was, from where I'm sitting, is that the inflation it offset the 0.5 wage gains. And that's a big deal. When you think about what is impacting low-income consumers, well, inflation just offset all of the wage gains that they made last month. Poof. Egg prices are up 15.2%, poof. And so they're going to abruptly rein in restaurant spending because it's largely discretionary. And I think, that coupled with this barrage of news, what is going to happen? Is Medicaid going to get cut? Is our SNAP benefits going to get cut? There's layoffs happening within the federal government. There's layoffs happening in the private sector. We just saw Chevron lay off thousands of people. It's a pretty dismal time. Kelly believe Alade from Denny's touched on this during the earnings call, that consumers are really fatigued right now with all of this confluence of stuff that's happening. And I think with all the uncertainties and the higher prices, that's probably what's going on here, is people are just like, time out. I don't need this, extra meal from a restaurant. I don't need this $8 drink today.
Yeah. And hey, whatever you think about a lot of the changes being made, I think to your point, it's the fatigue. It's that there's been a lot in a little amount of time. And anytime you feel a little bit of chaos, no matter if the chaos leads to good or bad, whatever, it's still chaos. And people become worried about that. They start to hunker down. They start to try to save a little bit more. And which is the responsible thing to do. But unfortunately, that is much to restaurants' chagrin. And I think that they're, regardless of what happens with a lot of these changes that you've mentioned, look, as we come into spring, I think there's at least some optimism that, hey, the weather is going to get a little bit nicer. People are going to want to go sit on a patio as it gets warmer. It has been a truly abysmal winter. I mean, anybody wants to talk about that, Alicia, it should be you.
We were due. We've been pretty mild the past couple of years.
Well, my brother-in-law, who must just be the farmer's almanac, I mean, all of last summer, he's like, it's too hot. It's going to be a bad winter. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Go tell it to the farmer's almanac. But no, he was right. It's been a pretty bad winter. So regardless, I think there should be at least a little bit of optimism for Q2. And Wendy's, Kirk Tanner, CEO, even mentioned that in reporting their earnings for Q4. They said Q1 would be soft, but they noted that it was a trough and that there would be an increase coming, that they're feeling a little bit better about it, and that perhaps chicken and beverages are
that's a silver bullet.
Which is lucky for all of us, I guess you could say. I mean, Alicia, I expect we will still see more. I mean, chicken and beverage innovation, obviously you get people excited and encouraged to come in and check these out, but I imagine we're going to be seeing a lot more value in 2025.
Yeah, the McValue platform, for example, as McDonald's goes the industry. Of course, we've said that. And Taco Bell has expanded their value, Wendy's, Burger King. It's not going to go away. To our earlier point, it's just a matter of finding the balance with those full margin items, because we have to still be top of mind for the low income cohort, but we can't do it while compromising our margins. We still have a business to run. If I can make one final point, I got some data this week that was super interesting as I was parsing through this low income retrenchment, if you will. And Revenue Management Solutions found that 45% of diners are visiting the QSR segment less often than they did pre-pandemic. That is being driven by low income diners. Almost 50% of those that earn less than $50,000 annually report visiting QSRs less. So this isn't a Q1 situation. This isn't a 2024 situation. This pullback from this cohort has been happening since 2019. Menu prices are up almost 30% since 2019. So I guess that we shouldn't be surprised about this. It doesn't seem like rocket science to me. So yes, the value environment will absolutely continue.
I want to float one thing to you, Alicia, before we move on, which is, I've thought often about the comparisons between COVID and the recession of 2008, and how there are a lot of similarities for how the industry has evolved out of each of them. And if you do look back to the time frame of 2012, 2013, and 14, we came out of the recession, and we're arguably going through a lot of the same changes where QSRs were hurt particularly badly as customers pulled back on discretionary spend. What you saw was fast casual really took off.
Yeah.
And the argument there was, well, if I'm going to spend on restaurants, I want better quality. My frequency is going to decline. But when I go out, instead of going to that QSR, I'm going to go to the fast casual, because I want something a little bit better with that, one time I'm going out per month versus two, or whatever that might be. And you saw the fast casual boom. Do you think, we look at numbers for like Dutch Bros, I don't count as fast casual, but if you think of like a Cava, which continues to just be an absolute rocket ship, and I know you're going to be reporting on them next week as they report their earnings. the expectation has to be that Kava is going to have numbers that just blow us all away. Do we think that QSRs is casual growing at QSR's expense like it did 15 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, I unquestionably, fast casual is a mature segment now, and the price disparity between fast casual and QSR has blurred at an accelerated pace since the pandemic. And, Scott Boatwright said something that really intrigued me during Chipotle's earnings call. You count Kava, then you got Wingstop, Chipotle, Sweetgreen, they're all doing really, really well. And investors are, really chasing that fast casual dollar more than they are other segments. So you kind of want to follow the money there. And it comes down to that value proposition. When Scott Boatwright was leading Chipotle's call last week or a couple weeks ago, he mentioned this, that they are still priced favorably compared to their competitive peers, but they also have higher quality products, the convenience of the Chipotle. He called it benefit over price. And I think that's a sweet spot for fast casual, is that benefit over price. It's a perceived higher quality, perceived healthier halo. They still have the convenience attributes most of the time that QSR has. And the price point, again, that disparity has sort of shrunk. And so fast casual really sits in that sweet spot right now with discerning consumers. I don't see that changing. But to your other point, if you look at the similarities between the challenges that the industry went through during the Great Recession and the challenges that the industry has sort of gone through for the past couple of years, out of that comes a lot of innovation.
Yes.
And so that is exciting, that opportunity. What does that mean? We're starting to see a lot of really innovative stuff happening across the board, from the menu to operational efficiencies to tech integration in a smart way to employee propositions. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening in this industry, and it's because it's out of necessity, and I think that is what excites me the most.
Totally agreed. I think the next couple of years could be fun as far as restaurant innovation goes, because we could see a lot more interesting innovation in the fast casual space in particular, like we saw in the last decade. All right, so speaking of innovation, here in the extra serving of this episode, I want to talk about technology innovation in particular. And joining us to talk about that is our very own, as I drag this out, until she gets here.
You want me to get on my drum set and do a roll? That's right
the
there.
The longest drum roll ever is senior editor Joanna Fantozzi. Joanna, welcome to Extra Serving. Joanna, I was just mentioning how, Alicia and I just talked about fast casual innovation in particular, because QSRs, as they are reporting, softer sales, and as we talk about the lower income consumer is pulling back, perhaps here in Q1 with all of the chaos going on in the world, fast casual could benefit from that. And there's some indication that, maybe those that are innovating really could win the day because they're providing value through quality. But where I want to talk about innovation with you is, of course, technology, which is your beat here at NRN. And you just wrote this great report about the state of tech and the industry based on the National Restaurant Association's State of the Industry report. And you pulled some good insights out of that regarding technology and what we should expect in 2025. And I think the headline here is really interesting, which is the fact that not many operators seem to think that their technology investments are leading to a valid return on their investment. Tell me more about that.
I think that this isn't terribly surprising. In fact, you might want to stay tuned for the next print issue of NRN, because I'll be exploring this topic in a little more detail. It definitely seems like I thought this was very interesting, that there's this interesting double-edged sword or dichotomy here between, according to the National Restaurant Association State of the Industry report, that's a mouthful, 83% of operators say that the use of technology in a restaurant provides a competitive advantage, but only 28% say that it improved their restaurant's profitability. And I thought that just seems paradoxical to me. It seems kind of contradictory, a little bit strange. And I think that it goes into kind of what we've been seeing is that I think that, and I've been speaking to some experts and operators about this topic for my next feature, that I think that a lot of restaurants are kind of now in the second phase of technology investment, because there was this kind of flurry of innovation, like you said, everything AI, everything automation. And even though we were talking a lot about it, in truth, it really was only in the beta phase and the test phase. And some operators are pulling back on that. And not to say it's necessarily a negative thing, a bad thing, but just to say that, they're realizing that the technology is not quite perfect yet. And so that could be a reason. But yeah, I've just found those two statistics just to be really interesting. And another interesting one is that only 4 in 10 operators surveyed said that their technology improved customer satisfaction, and only 30% say it improved employee training. So it's making you more competitive, but it's not actually improving things quite yet and behind the scenes. So it sounds kind of like
Yeah.
technology is needed to kind of keep up with the times, but it's not quite there yet. It's not quite perfect yet, and it's probably not pulling in as many results as operators would like.
It's interesting because, a lot of the tech conversation of the past couple of years has also been around how really complex it became. You got so many different layers to the tech stack. And especially with some smaller brands, there was just a lot of confusion and being overwhelmed by how many different layers there were. So the trend has skewed toward more integration. A lot of the tech companies are trying to work together to make sure things can integrate properly so that you can remove a lot of the complexities. There was some indication, I think, that probably has proved itself out, that there would be some consolidation in the industry because it had just become too much. Everybody recognized the need for food service technology during COVID, and all these companies rushed into the space, which is great. But was it too much? Because I do wonder if now, with the attention that was placed on innovation in tech, that a lot of operators rushed to jump on board to be innovative, to meet the future. And instead, maybe they're underwhelmed by what it is, how it's actually performing. Do you think that might
Yeah,
be the case,
absolutely.
Joanna?
And I think that we're just talking about this right now, but I think this attitude has persisted for a few years. I've probably mentioned this before, but a couple of years ago, and now this isn't quite recent. This is a couple of years ago. I went to NAFM and I overheard a conversation. They were standing in front of one of the robots that takes your order and flips burgers, probably not at the same time. Um, and they were just like, these two operators were standing there looking, and they're like, "This thing is huge. Where would I put it? How is this practical? Like, how is this helpful for me?" And I just thought that was really interesting. Now, that's just the robotics part of things, which we know there's been a little bit of a backlash toward against robotics. But now we're seeing that some of these other software innovations as well. Again, not to say that you shouldn't. It's like I said, it's a double-edged sword, because technology innovation and investment is so incredibly important, because customers expect that. Customers expect to have a frictionless experience when they're trying to, order online through whatever channel that they want. But it's just not quite perfected yet, and I think that operators are realizing that, and so I think that might be where some of this pushback is coming from. But yeah.
Yeah, this is a good place to plug Carl Orsborn, who wrote Delivering the Digital Restaurant alongside Meredith Sandland, longtime contributors for NRN, and have some great content around the digital restaurant technology, food service technology in particular. Just published yesterday a great piece from Carl about how software as a service became this great tool for the industry to get us to this point where you have companies rushing to do 100% digital ordering. And that's great, but that it has its limitations. And there are some things that restaurants should start considering as far as what's next, particularly as you look at AI being a part of this equation. So go to nrn.com/speakerbox to get to our speaker box section, and you'll find that latest contributed byline from Carl. Alicia, I want to pull you into this conversation too. I mean, Joanna mentioned robotics and sort of how am I going to incorporate that in my restaurant? Especially with robotics, there was a measure of novelty to a lot of this food service technology. And sometimes I do wonder, too, if there was a lot of novelty to everything that was offered to restaurant operators, and that perhaps some of that shine wears off as the real things come into focus in these difficult times of trying to get customers in the doors. Alicia, what do you make of the state of food service tech and whether or not some of that novelty is kind of fading?
I think the novelty was there because it was 2022 and the industry was having a significant renaissance because of pent-up demand. If you look at the past 5 years since COVID, 2022 was completely anomalous. Lockdowns went away. Consumers had all this money in their pocket, and they spent it, in earnest at restaurants. And so operators are like, let's go get a robot. and then reality set in, where the supply chain tightened up, labor tightened up, and, the renaissance really dissipated really quickly. And the operating environment became very tangled up, from all the challenges coming out of COVID. And that's when operators kind of got smart about where they need to focus their tech investments, knowing it needs to be somewhere. I like Joanna's point about paradox, because that's exactly what this report outlines. I'm stunned that, that 28% only, they don't find profitability with their tech investment, but only 27% want to invest in technology that can control their costs this year. That seems wonky to me. If we're gonna be smarter and more efficient with tech, to me, it seems like we should be using it to control costs. But the other thing is that's really interesting to me is that I don't think I have another point. I did have another point, but I can't remember it. I'm just so weirded out that, if there's a positive here with that 28%, not finding profitability, 60% still want to invest. So they're not deterred by it. And the point that I'm coming back to, forgive me, I had the opportunity to speak to Joe Park when Yum launched their integrated software as a service platform called Byte by Yum. Yeah. Very smart. Of course, Yum can do it. They've got the deep pockets to do it. And Joanna has reported at length about the bigger companies doing more of this integration. But his point was that the average restaurant operator deals with 15 different types of tech. That's 15 different contracts, 15 different points of contact. That is not what people go into the restaurant industry for. And so if we can get to this advanced 2.0 phase that Joanna sort of coined, or even 3.0, where we figure out how to streamline that all into one, I think this report we're going to see that 28% profitability jump significantly, hopefully by next year, where restaurant operators know what they're doing and why they're doing it and can glean the benefit of their investment.
Totally. Yep. It's a good caveat to say here is that, look, technology is not going away. It's not going to become less a part of this experience, but I do think we're probably at something of a turning point here where it's like, hey, we've got all these tools. Now let's figure out how to use them. And AI really could become a big piece of that. I think to your point, Alicia, when you talk about using technology to control food costs, AI, I think, is going to be huge in that regard. You're going to see a lot more use of AI to figure out COGS and stuff like that. So, okay, I can't leave you guys now without our lightning round. This one related to technology. I want to ask you, what is one tech innovation you think we'll be talking about the most out at the end of 2025? Joanna, we're going to start with you.
I think that we're going to be, this might be a little bit cheating because I've said this before, but the invisible AI that is just kind of it's not so much the voice AI or the front of the house, the invisible AI that is kind of working on your workhorses and is going to be automating things like inventory management. I think that maybe that's a little bit more boring than robotics and voice AI, but I think that is going to be what is perfected soonest.
Boring but useful. Alicia, what do you think?
Drone delivery. Just kidding.
All right, 2019, they called and wanted a prediction back, okay?
No, I think that, when you think about where operators want to invest more this year, and when you think about some of the early earnings calls that we've had, I think that location-based marketing investment is going to be a significant ramp up. We're going to talk about loyalty evolution as part of that. Dutch Bros is a great example here with that location-based marketing. That was a huge tailwind, Sam, that you and I didn't touch on, from their quarter. And so we're just getting smarter on how to talk to our customers. And we have to, because as we mentioned over and over again, our customers are getting more selective. And so that investment, I think, is going to be perhaps the strongest ROI here.
Yeah, that's a good prediction. Okay, what I will say, I'm going to keep things a little bit simple, which is I've heard a lot from especially casual operators about tableside ordering becoming more a part of their plans. And I think this is a twofold prediction, which is I think tableside ordering will become a bigger part of casual, but sort of dovetails into, I think, technology as it can facilitate hospitality, because those are two things I'm hearing a lot about, which is we want to do tech and have tableside ordering in a full service environment, but we really want to still emphasize hospitality as part of that experience. So I think those two things, especially in the full service sector, we'll be talking about for a while, because they need to figure out how to incorporate technology, but also provide that special human touch in that experience. Joanna Fantozzi, Alicia Kelso, as always, thanks for joining me at Extra Serving. We are going to roll now into an interview by our colleague, Senior Food and Beverage Editor Bret Thorn, who spoke with Kathleen Kennedy. Talk to you next week.
How you doing, Kathleen Kennedy?
I'm doing terrific. How are you doing?
I'm also doing terrific. You're the Director of Culinary Innovation at Marco's Pizza, but you've been all over the place, right?
I have.
You were I think we first met when you were at Starbucks. You were at Jack in the Box.
Yep.
Kraft Foods, Walmart, Kroger, but you also cooked in fancy schmancy restaurants too, right?
I did Charlie Trotter's and the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. I'm from Chicago.
And so why did you decide to make that switch from fine dining to whatever you want to call it, industry?
So I have a friend who said that he wanted to die behind the grill. And that was never me. I didn't really find, I think, my place in the industry until I went into research and development. Because of the way my mind works, where I see different things from a menu and how different combinations and all my food memories, and I can kind of project and have a vision for what's possible. That is my nirvana. And that's why I made the change.
Makes sense. So you weren't all about the standing on your feet 16 hours a day and working hard in a hot kitchen in not awesome situations, which some people love, and I'm really glad they do, because I like restaurants.
Me too.
But you were more into conceptualizing stuff. Is that accurate?
It is, but I did do my time and paid my dues and, coming up back in the day. I think people, kids go to school now and want to be in R&D right away. But I think being in hotels and 4-star restaurants and doing some catering. And then I actually started teaching. I taught at the California Culinary Academy. And that's where I got into doing conceptual work and different work sessions and ideations. And that's when I really blossomed.
So what is the benefit of working in full service restaurants at a relatively high end, or super high end in the case of Charlie Trotter? How does that benefit you in your current job?
I think having the diversity of different types of cuisine and being able to pull together a blue plate special at the last minute, knowing how to cook all different techniques. I did stage in Paris too, so understanding what the industry is like, I understand the capability of different workers at different levels in different chains.
I see. And so now at Marco's Pizza, when you're developing new menu items, you, I would think, have an understanding of what can be implemented in the restaurants and what can't.
Absolutely. I was already on a call this morning with operations, walking through some of the new proposed products. And we did a simulation in a store yesterday to see, what a pizza maker can do, and if it was hard and if it would back up, the delivery or the belts, because we want to get that pizza to the customer as soon as possible in the best shape possible.
What, for example, are some new items that you helped create at Marco's? And, how did your understanding of the American consumer inform that?
So in the past year, we have launched 11 new products.
Whoa.
I know, a lot. It's been good. And basically, we have gone into farm to table cooking in a pizza chain. And so when I came in, which was like a year ago, December, they already had kind of found a product that they wanted to work with. This cheese that is a spicy cheese that has Reaper peppers and jalapenos and habaneros. And the first task that they asked me to do was to look at where in their portfolio it would make sense to use this cheese as an LTO. And we ended up doing a fiery flavors menu with 9 products. So we ended up going into a whole bunch of, I did the throwdown session. And with my counterpart on marketing, and then brought in leadership. And I thought they were going to whittle it down to 1 or 2 products, but they were like, no, we want to run with the whole thing. And that was just the first launch that I was part of. The second launch, they wanted to do a margarita pizza. First, we went to Chicago and did a dine around. We tried margarita on all different kinds of pizza styles.
Oh, okay.
But really the Neapolitan or the wood-fired is probably the most popular. But we needed to see what we could do in our kitchen. So we went to about 13 different places over a couple days. And then I came back and I tried to create it in the kitchen. And I started by making a gold standard, And we, I don't know if you know anything about Marco's, but we actually make our dough in-house. And we have an 18-hour fermentation. That's the minimum. And then only hold it for 72 hours. So there is some characteristics, of dough and flavor in that dough. So I started out with a thin dough ball, and then, tomato sauce like from San Marzano, and then whole leaf basils and fresh mozzarella. So that's what the gold standard is. How do we Marcoize it? And I would go through, 20 to 30 different variations, changing one ingredient at a time. So in this case, we thought our pizza sauce tasted really good instead of just San Marzano tomatoes. We brought in, Belgioso cheese. The real magic in this product was that I found from Superb Farms a basil that they only use the first or the second harvest and cut it and chop it before they freeze it, so there's not any water added to it. And they made like this basil slurry that tastes just like fresh chopped basil. So in order for us to do this promotion, we had to commit to a couple fields of basil. And so really we were working with the farmers to bring this to life in a chain restaurant in a way that I don't think has been done in the Big Four. We're the 5th largest with 1,200. And I don't think anyone has, I saw other chains roll out a margarita, but they didn't have fresh mozzarella and they didn't have this basil that permeates the kitchen and is bright and beautiful and really reminds you of wonderful fresh cooking.
So I bet that actually makes the restaurant smell better, doesn't it?
It does. Well, the restaurant smells good anyway, because cheese, cooking, but the basil really, it does. It brightens up the whole room. Now, some people like to use pesto, but I didn't want to dilute the basil. I didn't want the garlic and the Parmesan to interfere. So it really is a straight basil, with just salt, pepper, and a little bit of oil. And it does. It's really bright, and I think the franchisees were blown away. And the customers were blown away, and it did very well in most markets. And both the fiery flavors and the margarita brought in, 25% more customers.
Wow.
New customers.
That's a very, very, very successful LTO. Were they LTOs or were they? They
were LTOs. Now, both of them, because they did so well, we're looking at, should we bring them back? And I'm not sure, but if that will happen or not. We have one that's running right now. The last one that I did last year is called Triple Pepperoni Magnifico. Now, the margarita was a Magnifico too. And what a Magnifico is for us, it's the Marco's version of bold flavors, and it includes garlic sauce on the crust and Parmesan, which is an Italian herb mixed with Parmesan, all over the pizza. So that treatment was used on the margarita, but it was also used on this triple pepperoni, and that it has our two normal, the classic pepperoni, old world pepperoni, but we're introducing a shredded pepperoni that was developed to look like the pepperoni, or to taste bold like the pepperoni that's coming out of Canada, but then shredded. And so, that was shown a little bit at the Pizza Expo last year. We wanted to be one of the first to bring it to market, and it's done. I think it's the best LTO we've done from a sell-through. It's still on the menu. We couldn't let it get off.
I mean, yeah, if you say triple pepperoni, people say, yeah. And so what are the three you have? Your regular pepperoni.
Classic.
Yeah. And
Old
then,
World, which is the cupping.
Okay.
And then this shredded pepperoni that I'm not remembering what we call shredded pepperoni, but
what is there's a textural contrast between a classic and the sort of cup kind.
There is. And then when you put the shredded on top of it, and it's on top of all of them, it's the last thing that goes on, it gets crispy in the oven. So you've got that, that's augmenting the flavor, and it's a little bolder than American pepperoni.
What kind of ovens do you guys use at Marco's?
So we have a variety of ovens. In the test kitchen, I use a WOW oven. So Middleby Marshall. I know that they're looking at some new ovens with wider belts as well. But, mostly in the test kitchen, I use the WOW. And then like yesterday, when I want to see what happens to a product in a store, I just go to a store, and there's a variety of ovens in the stores, as well as they have multiple stacks, up to 3 ovens in some places.
So how do you figure out how to implement a pizza properly in all of your locations? Like, do you have to test in every oven, or what do you do?
I think it's calibrated pretty well. I know in our oven, we're usually at like 450 degrees for 5 minutes and up to 30 seconds. And we do a test on the pizza that's called a pep test. So using a large basic cheese pizza, we cook it, and then we flip over some of the slices, and then we cut into it and look inside and make sure there's no gel line. And based on that, we calibrate our ovens.
So a gel line, that indicates it's not fully cooked through?
Exactly.
And you guys are mostly franchised, right? Or all franchised?
Yes.
Very, very
pretty
franchised.
much. Mostly franchised.
So is it then up to the individual franchisee to sort of calibrate properly? I mean, I guess you guys are biased about that. But
they're supposed to do it in the beginning of each shift.
Makes sense. I hope they do.
Yeah, or at least once a week. Really, because it probably doesn't change day to day that much, but at least once a week. And then, we were looking at different crusts, and, definitely we want to see, again, no gel line in any crust. And we want to see the, crust and the crumb. We want to see the coverage of the cheese. We want to make sure that the tomato sauce is covered and that our crust is golden.
So are there crust innovations that you're working on, or is it? There are.
So one of the things we looked at and we're considering, is like a Sicilian style or a Napoleon, a thicker crust. Certainly I'm from Chicago, so Chicago crust. But in 20 different stores, we have a Detroit crust. So one of the things that I've looked into in the last year is what would that look like if we launched it system wide? Or is there something we can do with our current crust and perhaps proof it in a different way where you can get a good crust and crumb deliverable without it being too heavy? And I'm not quite there yet in terms of our current crust, if there's a way to do that. But the Detroit we have in Detroit is really a great crust.
And then normally that's baked like in a big pan, and
Square,
it's aluminum most of the time, I think. So do you do that at those 20
We do.
locations? So you have to have different equipment. I mean,
it's actually different flour, different yeast, 2 different oils. And that's why it's really hard to say that I would launch it to 1,200 stores, because that's a lot of SKUs. Then it's a different pan and a lid and a completely different proofing method.
Belgioioso Cheese is a family-owned and operated company specializing in artisan Italian cheesemaking. Using only natural ingredients and fresh local Wisconsin milk, master cheesemakers handcraft the full line of exceptional cheeses, guided by a commitment to quality and a respect for tradition. Ask your distributor about Belgioioso's award-winning fresh mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, mascarpone, American Grana, and Parmesan. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty.